Hello my friends, I am the Synodic Scribe, and I hope everyone's looking forward to the early release of Dawntrail tomorrow. And in the spirit of the supposed vacation that we're getting as advertised to us through media, I decided that today we're going to have a bit of a more casual and laid-back discussion about the lore of Final Fantasy XIV and what you may want to know about Tudal before you arrive. So, let us begin with an understanding that everything we're about to discuss is very old lore, my friends. And when I say old lore, I'm saying a lot of what I'm about to discuss is information from about, 9-10 years ago. So if there is a sudden change in the lore, like a retcon or a continuity error or an inconsistency that you see in Dawntrail that doesn't line up with what I say today, the writers had likely changed their mind at some point, and that may be the new lore. But I suppose that as a lore channel, it is my responsibility to tell you what we already know, and to better inform you as to what you may expect tomorrow. So, let's get started with Tudal, or as we've known it for a long time, the New World. The New World is considered to be one of the three major landmasses within the world of Hydaelyn, and of course, we already know of one of them, the three great continents. The continent of Aldenard, where Eorzea rests, Ilsabard, which is to its northeast, and then Othard, which is the far east. Those three great continents make up what is considered to be one massive landmass, because of course they are geologically connected. Below them is, of course, the mysterious continent of Mericidia, where Bahamut and Tiamat once roosted together. And of course, we have where we're visiting tomorrow, Tudal, the New World, far to the west of Eorzea. But, interesting to note, Tudal was originally cited as being a continent that was so large that it would take all three of the great continents to smush together to equal its size. Now that we've gotten a map of the continent, we can see that that's not entirely true anymore. If anything, it's smaller than we originally expected. If anything, I would say that Tudal is the size of Aldenard and Othard if you took those two continents and stacked them on top of each other. That's how big this new continent is. Now, of course, that's not a small landmass, it's definitely big, but definitely not as big as originally assumed. But then that brings us to the next point, its distance. If we look at the map, it looks closer to Aldenard than it should be, doesn't it? If anything, it took longer for us to sail to the far east. It took us longer to sail to Kugane than it would for us to sail to the New World. So that begs the question, why are we only just now sailing over there? Why are we only just now talking about this location? And there are two reasons for that. Number one, the writers likely hadn't thought of anything yet. But two is the more important bit of information. The oceans between the New World and Aldenard are a bit notorious. There are strange phenomena that go on in the Indigo Deep that make people suggest that the ocean itself is somehow magically tumultuous. Imagine the Bermuda Triangle for a moment. Like, there's this invisible danger zone between Aldenard and the New World, which made traveling to and from those landmasses difficult, if not impossible, for inexperienced sailors. So, understandable, not many people sailed west without a reason, but eventually someone did. So, whether you believe that the oceans are just naturally tumultuous between these continents or magically dangerous, well, we may find out this to be true or false within the expansion itself. But who was this person that braved those waters and brought us back information about the New World originally? Well, that was a Seawolf Rogadin from Limsa Lominsa called Ketenram the Blue. He was a rather boisterous explorer, and he was eager to see if the New World was indeed as grand as some of the old tales told, or was a myth, and either didn't exist or was some puny landmass. So, he braved the western waters, sailed straight through, and managed to make it all the way to Tyrol. This event is specified as happening 80 years ago, which may sound familiar to some of you, because Wuk Lamat, upon meeting her, she says that Tuliolol was founded by her adopted father, Galul Jaja, 80 years ago. That's oddly coincidental, isn't it? Well, either one of two things happened. Ketenram either arrived in the New World and met Galul Jaja and they struck up an accord and he helped found Tuliolol, or he simply stumbled onto Tuliolol as soon as it was founded, which to me is the much more comical version of this story if true. But that being said, he did land upon the New World. He did meet Galul Jaja 80 years ago. And Ketenram, knowing that this was not only an adventurous tale anymore, but a diplomatic mission, approached Galul Jaja and showered him with gifts from Eorzea. And Galul Jaja was so impressed and so taken aback by the Rogadin's generosity that he gave Ketenram two things in return. Or rather, the two things that I'm about to specify are the only important things he gave him. Number one, he gave Ketenram the Blue freedom to explore Tyrol to his heart's content. Think about that for a moment. He was given the blessing of the leader of a country to go wherever he wanted and learn as much as he could. That's like if I went to England and got the blessing from the royal family to basically do whatever I want. That's a big deal to some people. And it was a big deal to Ketenram. He took full advantage of this situation, mapping out much of Tyrol with his crew, collecting fruits and vegetables that were very interesting and unique that did not appear over in Eorzea, and he also got to know the people, their culture as well. Ketenram and his crew stayed in the New World for multiple months, like months upon months. I believe it was a little more than a year he stayed there, learning as much as he can and gaining as much as he could, before eventually departing Tyrol and sailing back to Eorzea to share what he learned with everyone. But the second gift that the leader, Galul Jaja, gave him was a large silver statue, or figurine, I believe it was called. Whether or not this item plays a role in the story or not in the future, who knows? Or maybe it was just a beautiful paperweight that Ketenram used before eventually passing away. Either way, Ketenram sailed back to Eorzea to tell everyone what he discovered, and he brought gifts with him as well. He brought the fruits and vegetables that he and his crew found, and you would be happy to know that some of the items that were unique to the New World that were brought to Eorzea were pears, tomatoes, and everyone's favorite, Popatoes. Yes, you can say that we're going to the homeland of Popatoes in Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Not to be confused with angry potatoes, the Lalafels. They actually come from another location. So, Ketenram came back with all of these items and told everyone what he experienced and what was over there. He told them about Mamul Jah and all of these fantastical things. And this is where our story connects to what's happening right now. He heard rumor of the fabled City of Gold. Indeed, Ketenram heard rumor or was told about the story of the City of Gold 80 years ago, and he brought that knowledge with him back to Eorzea. So we've known about the rumored City of Gold for 80 years, but no one has been able to prove that it exists or not. Well, until now, of course, as we're about to experience within the expansion. Originally, Ketenram wanted to dub the New World Ketenland for his rediscovery of the continent, and that never stuck, so everyone simply referred to it as the New World instead. Which, of course, I bet to a lot of you begs the question, well, why didn't they call it Tyrol? Why didn't they call it Tuliolol? Well, besides, most likely the writer simply hadn't come up with the name yet, it's likely that as soon as Tuliolol was founded, it didn't have its name yet. Ketenram arrived as soon as the country was founded after all. It might not have had an official name yet, and they may not have had a specific name for the continent itself. Like, for example, the Eorzea refer to the Azim Steppe as their homeland, but the Azim Steppe isn't the continent of Othard, is it? So it's much more easier to say that, well, instead of just one specific place where the Mamuja were, the New World referred to the entire continent. But suffice to say, knowledge of the New World spread like wildfire, fascinating many people about this exotic location with strange creatures, foods, and animals. And there are some people that are famous for having sailed there and back as well. As you all may be happy to know, Admiral Merlweb, before becoming Admiral, had sailed to the New World, just because. And, in fact, she does know about this continent more than most people in Limsa Lominsa because of that. Though it's important to note that another big reason why trade and travel between the New World and Eorzea didn't become, like, super normal at first is because about 20 years after the exploration of Ketenram to the New World and back is when the Garlean Empire officially began its conquest. Indeed, people weren't super jazzed about the idea of traveling with a warmongering group of sociopaths fighting and conquering all of their neighbors and slowly spreading to other continents as well. Countries were noticeably hesitant to move massive amounts of groups and supplies with a potential war on the horizon, which, as we all know, proved to be a rather wise decision as they would eventually make their way to try to invade and conquer Eorzea. But the Garlean Empire's invasion wasn't just well known to the three great continents. News of Garlemald and their dangerous warmongering reached the New World. It reached the ears of the Mamuja. And anyone who understands Mamuja culture understands that they are a very trial by fire kind of people. You need to go out into the world and prove yourself if you're going to pretend to be proud of something. Like, that's how their culture works. So, when the Mamuja, or rather groups of Mamuja, heard of what was going on in Eorzea, they got on their ships and they sailed from the New World all the way over to Limsa and, of course, the western coast of Eorzea. Why? To offer their services. Simply put, the groups of Mamuja that you see within locations like Lenosha, they are originally mercenaries. Mercenaries that had come over to the continent of Aldenard to assist with either the invasion of Garlemald or any other issues that we were facing during the 7th Umbral Calamity. Now, of course, some of the Mamuja, as you know, weren't exactly entirely peaceful. To them, they were here to not just offer their services, but also to conquer, to carve out a piece of land for themselves. And that's why, of course, we had to fight the Blessed Siblings over in Wanderer's Palace Hard, because, well, he wanted to try to carve out a piece of land for himself to prove himself as a leader and maybe become a potential heir to Dawnservant. But, of course, they ran into the unfortunate situation of facing the Warrior of Light, and then got summarily shanked by many Tomberries for his trouble afterwards. So, unfortunately, as you can tell, he is not eligible for anything anymore. And that will bring us to the last and possibly most recent bit of lore regarding the New World or Tyrol before we move into Dawntrail, and that is involving the Blue Mages. Anyone who's done the Blue Mage quests knows all about the tribe called the Waki. The Waki are a group of Hyur tribesmen that live within the New World, that live within Tyrol, and are well known for their unique form on magical practice, which is to take or copy the etheric signature of other monsters' abilities and techniques and make them theirs, which, as we know, became blue magic over here in Eorzea. conceptually, it's not too different than what summoners do. A summoner copies the etheric signature of a primal and then recreates it into a demi-summon, an eggy, what have you. A blue mage is copying the etheric signature of a specific spell, ability, or technique of a monster and then recreating it with their own ether. That's blue magic. So essentially, we learned that not only does Tyrol have its own spell schools, but some of it can be adapted and learned by those living within Eorzea. However, another thing worth noting is that it became part of the Blue Mage quest that essentially someone wanted to claim ceruleum deposits over in the New World that the Blue Mage tribe or the Waki tribe just so happened to be sitting upon. And of course, they didn't want to let go of that land. It was sacred to them. But the important thing here is that there are ceruleum deposits over on the New World. So as much as we may want to say that geologically the New World is super different from other locations, there are still some visible consistencies between this continent and others. So don't be too surprised if you see ceruleum geysers or other fantastical phenomena that you are familiar with seeing in other parts of the world. So, just as a quick recap, my friends, Ketan Ram sailed over to the New World and rediscovered the New World 80 years ago, which coincidentally just so happened to be the same time that Tuliolol was founded. He came back to Eorzea with tales of the Golden City, fruits and vegetables, as well as tales of the blessed siblings Galul Jaja. This knowledge inspired other sailors to travel west to see the New World for themselves as well, including Admiral Merlwib Blohisvin. And the reason that travel between Eorzea and the New World didn't become super casual immediately is because of the steady Garlean invasion 20 years later. But just because we weren't super excited to travel to the New World doesn't mean that people from Tyrol weren't excited to travel over to Eorzea, i.e., the Mamolja mercenaries that came over to offer their services, and of course some of them that tried to carve out land and conquer it for themselves. But we also had people like Martin, who traveled over to the New World, learned about the magic of the Waki, and brought it back with him to Eorzea. So while we don't have tons of lore and knowledge surrounding the New World, we have just enough to paint a picture, so to say. We know that the tale of the Golden City has been around for a long time. We know that the New World has unique magical phenomena, i.e. blue magic and other things. We know that the continent shares geological similarities with other landmasses because of the ceruleum deposits. And we also know, more importantly, that Tuliolol as a country is still extremely young. Only 80 years is a very, very short lifespan for a country. And the fact that Galul Jaja is passing the torch to the next generation is a very big deal, because this will mark the first time that leadership of the country has not been his. Which is why whoever becomes the next Dawn Servant needs to have the country's best interests at heart. Otherwise, well, they may very well go back to the warmongering and infighting days that the clans of Mamolja were used to back before Galul Jaja's unification 80 years ago. But after everything we've discussed today, tell me, my friends, what are you most looking forward to learning about Tyrol in the coming expansion? Are you excited to just go in blind and experience it all as it is? Or are there certain things that you're hoping to learn or expect to see as you play through the expansion? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to like this video, and of course, please subscribe to the channel for more lore in the future. I, of course, will be playing the expansion religiously to collect as much data as possible and bring it straight back to you in my traditional lecture format. So, I hope everyone is having an amazing day, and I hope that all of you who have pre-ordered Endwalker and are about to experience the early access tomorrow are excited for the experience. But as always, as you go out and explore Tyrol and experience this new chapter in Final Fantasy XIV story, remember to stay safe, my friends. I look forward to seeing you all in Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail.